Good Friday morning, everyone, and welcome to the Backyard Naturalist. My name is Tim, and I'm your host this week. And this is a very special episode because it marks the kickoff to the 2024 Brew City Birding Festival. So, for the next 8 days, the Urban Ecology Center will be celebrating birds. We'll be looking for and recording birds. We'll be playing games and doing trivia and traveling and just hearing great stories through lectures and workshops. One of my favorite weeks of the entire year. I'll mention more about it in a bit, and I can't think of a better group of birds for us to begin the celebration with than owls, because regardless of how much you pay attention to birds, uh, in your daily life, from a very young age, we as humans tend to know what an owl looks like and what an owl says, no matter where you live in the world, no matter how much you pay attention to them. And I can't imagine anyone not feeling some sense of wonder or magic from hearing an owl in the wild when you're camping, or seeing an owl, whether it's the daytime like a snowy owl, or at night. Um, to me, it just doesn't get much more magical or mysterious than that, in my opinion. It's like a connection to uh like a portal to a completely different world, and you get that glimpse. And the same can be said for humans throughout our period on this planet. So sit back with your beverage and your snacks if you have them, and put on your thinking cap and stretch your neck vertebrae as we listen to the many stories that owls have to tell us in episode 36 of season 5 of the Backyard Naturalist, and the opening morning, the opening day of the Brew City Birding Festival in Owl's Moving Castle. But first, with a nod to PBS, whose phrase we borrow on a weekly basis, this program is made absolutely possible through viewers like you, whether you're here with us this morning in person or you're watching this recorded. As long as you keep showing up, we'll keep showing up on Friday mornings at 9 a.m. And we are especially grateful for our fantastic community of Backyard Naturalist subscribers. You're the best. We love you. If you are watching this today and you enjoyed this program, please consider joining this supportive and fun and inquisitive community of subscribers. Your support brings you hassle-free registration. You are automatically registered every week, and you can also attend our monthly in-person outings as we explore the backyards of Milwaukee, both the hidden and not so hidden, near and far green spaces that this area has to offer. Some you may never have heard of, some you may have heard of, but hadn't yet explored, and others you may know, but could know at a deeper level. So this month, for example, we're exploring a place that I think many of you are very well acquainted with, but we're going to explore the Rotary Centennial Arboretum at a time when the forest floor is carpeted with wildflowers, when the trees may be dripping with warblers. And we'll try to help you gain a deeper understanding of the natural and human history of this place. So that's where we're going next week, Saturday, May 17th at 1 p.m. These trips are open to everyone and free for subscribers, and we hope you could join us. To register, please visit the Urban Ecology Center website. And once again, happy Brew City Birding Festival. We're in it. There's a whole bunch of trips and workshops and lectures and games and learning opportunities that will be happening over the next week. Last week, I went through day by day, so I won't do that again. But if you go to the UEC's YouTube page and watch the beginning of the May Apples Never Fall episode, last week's episode, it kind of goes day by day what's happening. You can also get that at the website. I do want to highlight once again that on Tuesday night, the keynote speaker of the festival will be Tiffany Kirsten. Her talk is Birdie Big Year, Elevating Women Birders. So it's Tuesday night, May 14th from 5 to 7 at Riverside Park. It's free, made possible by a partnership with Visit Milwaukee, with The Table, and Metro Audubon. As a sexual assault survivor, Tiffany spent 2021 traveling to all corners of the country, tallying birds and gifting personal safety alarms to women she met along the way. Her goal was to see 700 species and to raise awareness of women's safety in the outdoors. She ended up surpassing her goal and setting a new record for the country with 726 species. And in her presentation, which is part of a national tour, she will lead us through the fear, empowerment, struggles, and healing that all played vital roles in the personal growth she experienced on this wild adventure. So for more information about this or any of the events from the Brew City Birding Festival, please visit our website. And quickly, in addition to highlighting the natural wonders in our backyards for this program, we also like to keep tabs on the natural wonders in the skies to which our backyards are connected by tracking astronomical events and human attempts at exploring our backyards. So last week, mentioned that Boeing was ready. I didn't even know if it had launched to send astronauts to the International Space Station. When the space shuttle program was scrapped, we needed to find new ways to get humans there and back. SpaceX was the first to do it, and we're still waiting for a second option. So Boeing had a launch planned. Its attempt was thwarted by technical issues, as often happens, and the new launch date is scheduled to be no sooner than May 17th. So Boeing's had a rough go. It'd be nice to see them get some success. And it would be nice for us to have multiple options for transporting people to and from the space station. And a final reminder, this is another really good time of year for shooting stars. So even though the peak of the Eta Aquariid meteor shower was last week, we're still getting a ton of great meteors. This is from the Earth passing through the debris that was left by Halley's Comet. And we'll see that for the next few weeks. So anytime you get a clear night, you're up, or more importantly, a clear morning and you're up and you get to a dark sky, it's a great time to look for shooting stars and making all those wishes. So super excited to tell some owl stories. I'll give a shout out to Stuff You Should Know and How Stuff Works, as always, their primary source of information for me. I do also want to give a really big shout out to a new podcast called Bird Joy Podcast. They've only done 2 episodes, and I just absolutely loved both of them. One is by one of the hosts is a colleague here, Dexter Patterson, who's one of the heads of the BIPOC Birding Club of Wisconsin. He's joined up with a Philadelphia birder, and just like I listened to those episodes, and they talk about like these seminal bird stories, these bird sparks that really get you into birding, and they talk about how important community is to birding, and like they helped re-spark my joy for birding. And it's not just about the birds are amazing, it's about the community of birders that you enjoy that with, and I'm sure all of you can relate to that. So I do encourage you to listen if you have a chance to the Bird Joy podcast. You can find it anywhere. I liked both episodes, but particularly the second episode, Why Birding. If you're just kind of know some things about why birding is important to you, that's going to really help you explore those. So anyway, one of those stories is about seeing an owl, and we're joining a long list of humans that have told owl stories since humanity began, I'm sure. Probably for the million or so years of human existence, we've noticed owls. We've weaved them into our stories, into our art, legends, myths, and likely because we don't see them as often as other birds, because they're usually active when we're not. Because the nighttime is their domain, they're just kind of shrouded in mystery. But when you do see them or when you do hear them, it's just one of the absolute coolest creatures. When an owl turns that pivot head and stares at you, you just, I don't know, like how you couldn't feel these chills of awesomeness. So owls are animals, they're birds, they're a branch of the dinosaurs that belong to the order Strigiformes. About 250 species, depending on who you talk to. It's not a lot, but owls are pretty much everywhere. They're on all the continents except Antarctica. They've adapted to all kinds of niches, from forest to grasslands to deserts to tundra to cities to suburbs to agriculture. As a group, they've evolved some pretty fantastic adaptations, most of them related to nocturnal hunting, that have kind of is their domain, adds to their mystique. But to me, it's really summed up by just how intensely they can stare at you. I mean, they're looking deep inside your soul. They're looking beyond the surface of you. Those big, beady, front-facing binocular eyes with those cavernous black pupils. There is one other group of animals that I believe can stare directly into your soul, and that's the frogs. Frogs and owls. Um, we talked about frogs last month. We got a couple of great frog talks coming up. Super excited about that. But those are the groups that really can just see in you. You can't hide anything from owls and frogs. Owls are superbly designed as predators. And just as a quick etymology reminder, owls are considered, well, they're birds of prey, and they're raptors. So a bird of prey technically is any bird that eats animals. So technically, a hummingbird is a bird of prey because they eat insects, and insects are animals. They use that to feed their young. Culturally, colloquially, we do not refer to hummingbirds as birds of prey. That's the hawks and the falcons and the owls. Then the term raptor basically means that it catches its prey with its feet, as this snowy owl is demonstrating. It doesn't use its bill. So, for example, the northern shrike is often a raptorial songbird because they can catch prey with both their bill and their feet. And again, most songbirds are going to be catching, and a lot of other birds are catching with their bills. So if they catch the prey with their feet, that's a raptorial bird, a raptor bird. These technical definitions, but kind of fun to tease out. So as a group, owls, larger, broader wings, larger heads, shorter tails, that upright posture kind of makes them look bulky and stocky and strong. Um, there are two major groups of owls taxonomically. So owls are divided into two families. One family is the Titanidae. Those are the barn owls. There's only 19 species, 17 species of true barn owls, and a couple of kind of off to the side owls that are technically barn owls in this family. They're characterized by having that kind of heart-shaped face, that little Dracula widow's peak. And as a group, uh, slightly longer legs, longer bodies, and their vocalizations are different. They're more hissy and hooty, more hissy than hooty, more mechanical. And then all the other owls, the 230 odd species, they belong to the family Strigidae, which are the true owls. And this group tends to have a more rounded face, or the widow peak kind of continues to the bill. It's not a perfect grouping, but this is most of the owls that we know are in this true owl category. So we can kind of now take a look one by one at these great adaptations that make the owls the perfect nighttime predators. And I want to go back to those eyes, not only because I feel transfixed by them, you could stare at them, but uh, you probably hear comparisons of owl eyes, metaphorically. Like if an owl head was the size of a human head, our eyes would be the size of tennis balls, which they currently are not. They're much smaller than that. They're so big that they really don't function as eyeballs. They're really more like eye tubes. They can't move their eyeballs independently up and down, left and right like we can. They're fixed in place. They're far-sighted, so they're really good at focusing at things that are far away, like prey, but really close to that owl face, they can't see very well, and they use they use a little more touch and hearing for things that are close to them. Um, those because those eye tubes are fixed in place, um, for an owl to look at you, they have to do that superb rotation, that just perfect rotation that fixes that gaze on you, and just has that feeling of power. So owls have different degrees of nocturnality. I don't know if that's a word, but some owls are diurnal, like the northern hawk owl, and some owls are diurnal because they have to be because they live way up north where the sun doesn't set, like the snowy owls. So some are diurnal through adaptation, some are diurnal just because they have to be, and they're also nocturnal when when the sun is gone. Um, but the degree to which they're active in the day and night, a lot of owls are also active at dawn and dusk. They're crepuscular. Um, but if an owl is completely nocturnal, one of the signs that it is a completely nocturnal owl, that's only active in the dead of night. So this owl you can see has the multicolored eyes, um, and then if you look at an owl that is almost completely nocturnal, their eyes are almost completely black. There's probably has something to do with the mechanics of attracting light. Also probably has to do with being camouflaged. Um, but the eyes are a little bit of a clue as to how much and how big that pupil is, to their when they're active. So this is the Oriental Bay owl. Um, and this is an owl that actually, with its eyes closed, can see through its eyelids. It's very thin eyelids. Um, so most owls do see very well at night. Uh, Likely the best night vision of any animal, even better than your cats, if you can believe it. But they can't move their eyeballs; they have to move their heads, and then that likely led to the other adaptation, the feature that we most often associate with owls, that amazing pivot of the head that's just so slick and smooth. Um, they can't go completely exorcist. They can't do a 360-degree head turn, but they can pivot their heads 270 degrees, so 3/4 of the way around a circle. So if I were sitting at a dinner table and I wanted to look at the person on my left, I could do so by rotating my head to the right, all the way back, and then I could still look at them, which would be a super cool party trick, except for the fact that when an owl does that the entire way, they actually cut off the blood supply to their brain and their eyes. So you could only hold that party trick for so long before you either pass out or put your head back. But they have this amazing adaptation where they keep kind of a reserve blood supply up above their neck joints. So when they do that and, actually close off that blood supply, there is some kind of spare blood in their head to help kind of get through that period. So I would imagine it's not super comfortable for them, but they can do it, and they can do it without passing out. Um, so uh, they I just can't imagine that, like, just such a crazy adaptation. It's like the woodpecker tongue being anchored on their head. Slightly lesser known fact is that in addition to having that flexibility, rotationally, they often can move their head up and down very much. You'd have this barn owl on the right that has its head pretty much looking back, straight back, like its head was upside down. So they make up for the fact they can't use their eyes by just having this incredibly flexible head, that just pivots again so smoothly, like a gyroscope. Like it's got gyroscopes in it to help with all that. Um, we also, when we're drawing owls, we'll draw those ears, those pointy, iconic ears, which aren't ears. They're feather tufts that look like ears. There's no function of at all with those feather tufts and hearing, no ocular function. Those ears are used primarily for communication, with other owls, kind of like dogs will use their ears to communicate how they're feeling with other dogs and humans. So there's some communication that goes on with that. And then it's also thought that they can control those feathers to provide better camouflage, to like break up the pattern of their face. Um, I, some of you might have been with me one time, one of my amazing owl moments, when we went to Havenwood State Forest because some long-eared owls had been reported, and we knew pretty much exactly where they had been spotted. Small group, didn't want to disturb them too much, and we went to the spot where they had been seen. Been sitting there for 20 minutes, maybe a half hour. We were ready to give up, just didn't see them anywhere. It just wasn't our lucky day. And then a train goes, back behind Havenwoods, there's a train track. So a train goes through. Uh, the train scares the owls into flight, and we realized there were three owls within about 10 feet of where we were standing. If it hadn't been for the train, we never would have seen them. They were absolutely perfectly camouflaged, perfectly still, looked just like the trees. And there was like four of us, so it's not like, one of us missed it. We all missed it. Um, so for an animal that would be vulnerable to predation during the day, mastering that daytime camouflage is pretty important. And so, it's a fun activity, owl hole, to um, look at pictures of how masterfully owls can camouflage themselves. Um, it doesn't do justice to the actual camouflage like we witnessed that day in Haven Woods, but whether it's an owl in a tree, an owl in a cave, on a cliff, in grassland, they're all just very well camouflaged to their environment, which is important for not being eaten, and it's important for them to not, give their presence away to the things that they want to eat. So, um, even though those tufts of feathers aren't ears, owls do have incredibly efficient ears. And in a lot of species, the ears are asymmetrical. So most animals, our ears are symmetrical. Most of our body parts that plan are symmetrical. Um, but uh, in the owls, not only is one ear, in a lot of owls, not all of them, one ear is higher than the other, and they're both kind of focused in different directions, right? So like, the outside of your ear, even though they don't have that outer ear like we do, when it goes into their body, it's pointed in different directions, which makes them amazing at triangulating and pinpointing objects. Because another thing we do when we talk about owls to kids is there's a really kind of fun example. If you put a kid in the middle of a room, or anybody, you can try this at home, and you close your eyes and you have somebody around you, clap their hands or make a noise, and just try to see if you can point to the direction that you hear that noise from. One of the reasons that we can do that is because sound travels through the air in waves, and it will hit one of our ears slightly different time and with a different intensity than it hits the other ears. And then our brain just makes quick work of it. We don't have to think about it. And we can pretty much tell which direction it comes from. But because our ears are on a plane and flat, and from our probably the grasslands that we evolved in, um, if those sounds hit our ears at the exact same time, we really know that either that sound is directly ahead of us, directly behind us, or directly overhead. So if you make a sound directly overhead of somebody, or if you start to even get up or higher or lower, it's harder for us to pinpoint where those sounds are coming from. It just adds another dimension that our ears aren't used to. With the owls, kind of in that different directions, different there, it's like seeing more of a 3D image of the sounds. Um, and dogs will do this sometimes. They'll tilt their heads to there's a communication part of that too, but there's also some animals would do that to try to get a better like soundscape, um, taking them out of that plane. Uh, but owls just have a really good, mastery of pinpointing sounds. Their ears are so good that they can hear and locate a mouse that is under 2 feet of snow. So a snowy owl will just go right into a snowbank with no other signs other than they heard where that mouse was and grab it and leave. And they can do that under leaves. They can do that under dirt, um, solely by that amazing sound map that they have. And then they also have that facial disc, that also kind of adds to funneling sounds, to those ear tufts, which are behind those feathers. Um, so amazing way of finding, tracking prey, incredibly sharp hearing. But that's just one part of the puzzle, right? So the animals they're trying to hunt also have really good hearing. Um, and if you ever heard a bird, like a particular bigger bird, sometimes you won't see them, you'll hear them take off. Like if it's a hawk or a great blue heron or a crow or even a pigeon, you can hear those wings flapping. It's obvious even to our much poorer human ears that we can hear the sound of flapping wings. So if an owl were, tracking that mouse, if it those wings would be a dead giveaway to the prey. So in addition to their super keen sense of hearing, they've evolved the adaptation of almost completely silent flight. And there's several factors to this. There's the broad wings. First of all, allow the owl to spend more time soaring and less time flapping, where they could make a noise. But then even when flapping, um, if you look at the leading edge of an owl wing, and we have a snowy owl at the Urban Ecology Center, you can see this. You'll see that that leading edge is serrated, and the only other bird that, well, I'm sure there's other birds, but like the northern rough-winged swallow is called a roughwing because they also have similar things. Um, those serrations uh, primarily break up the turbulence, and it's that turbulence that you hear when a bird flaps. So it takes that sound from the turbulence and breaks it up into just, hundreds of tiny micro turbulences. And so it just breaks up the sound, and then the sound is, instead of going above a wing, most of it going like above the wing, and making sound, it actually kind of goes through the wing, where it's further muffled by other structures of the secondary feathers, of the downy feathers. So it's almost completely silent flight. And when Tori has a group of kids, or another educator, you can also demonstrate this if you take a rope, pretty much any kind of rope, cut it in half so you have two pieces of basically identical rope. And depending on what kind of rope or cord it is, if you spin it like a lasso, you'll hear that sound. If you take the other piece of rope and you cause these little mini serrations in it, you can, fray it a little bit. You spin that other piece of rope, it's usually much, much, much quieter. So essentially, that's pretty much what owls do in the structure of their feathers that make it much easier for them to sneak up on these prey. Their prey are nocturnal too, so their prey are also pretty good at hearing rather than visuals. And so it really has to have that extra advantage if it's going to be successful. There's three basic methods that owls use in hunting, and the most common is basically the sitting on a perch, listening basically for sound, and when it hears something, notices something, intensifies its attention on it, and then it will fly from the perch and pounce on the prey in kind of a surprise method. One of the most common ways that owls will hunt. But another method of hunting, which requires a little more energy, is called quartering flight. Quarter like the coin. And in this case, instead of searching from a perch, the owl will search for prey while flying. And so they're scanning while they're flying. It's one of the most common ways we will notice that a short-eared owl is there. A short-eared owl is one of the easier owls to spot because they are very crepuscular. They're often flying in low light conditions. And you'll see them over a field hunting, and incidentally, they share a habitat with a non-owl raptor, the northern harrier hawk. So the northern harrier hawk and the short-eared owl occupy almost the exact same niche in open grasslands, agricultural fields, savannas. They're not related, but because they're hunting in those conditions, they've evolved these parallel adaptations, similar flight patterns, that kind of low, uh, erratic, kind of tippy flight just above the grass line. They both have much longer, narrower wings than a typical owl. And it's also kind of cool that the face of the northern harrier is, for a raptor, much more owl-like. You see that kind of like that facial disc, which also likely has to do with the fact that it's using sound as a hunting clue. So a cool case of parallel evolution between the harrier hawk and the short-eared owl, two unrelated birds in the same habitat. And then probably the least common method of hunting, probably because it uses the most energy, is the helicoptering method. And you'll often see kestrels doing this, but essentially the owl is hovering in midair. It's nice if it has a good breeze, to help it keep it up. And it's kind of using that method to search for prey. That's like the helicoptering. But whatever method it uses, once it catches its prey with those very sharp talons, which pack an amazing amount of punch, they're really strong depending on the owl species. A great horned owl, you're talking about 1,000 pounds of pressure per square inch in that talon, and it's pointy. So 1,000 pounds per square inch in a tiny point is really bad for whatever this owl is trying to catch, because you're pretty much a goner if it gets those talons on you. And if you are a researcher or a bander, and you've got owls, you just have to be super careful, even with the smaller owls, of those talons, because they're so strong and you've got them close to your body. And if they grab a part that is, delicate, it can really injure you. So that's what you got to be careful about. Just perfect killing machines. And then after the owl catches the prey, they, for the most part, usually they'll try to swallow the prey whole, just like a snake. You'll see them just kind of go down the gullet. Obviously, if the prey is too big, if it's a rabbit or something, it's not going to be able to unhinge that lower jaw like a snake and eat the rabbit whole. So they will have to tear it up. But the smaller bits, then they'll swallow whole. They don't really chew or anything. Um, if it's if it's this mouse that it just ate, it will pass into an area called the proventriculus and then into the gizzard, and it'll sit in the gizzard for about 10 hours. And while there's mechanical and chemical digestion. All the digestible, useful parts are taken up by the owl. And then the non-digestible parts, the bones, the fur, are basically compacted. It kind of acts like a little compactor. And then it forms a pellet, which the owl then regurgitates, to the delight of naturalists and educators, who then take what looks like a piece of poo, but it's not. It's just a regurgitated pellet. And there's a lot of information you can find in that pellet. You can order owl pellets online if you want to take them home and study them yourself. It's more fun to find them in a natural area. If there's an abundance of prey, sometimes the owl will not eat all of its, eat everything that it caught. They will stash some food away, but usually not for more than a day or two. So these owl pellets are just a great way to determine, if you have owls in your area, if you haven't seen them. In Washington Park, there have been several times we've found some fantastic owl pellets for dissection, which also let us know that there were owls in Washington Park. Unfortunately, and this is an important thing to mention, likely at least two of those owls were probably killed because they ate rats that were poisoned by the neighboring humans. And so those homeowners that put out the rat poison essentially kill the owls. And if you want to learn more about that sobering subject, Amanda hosted a really fabulous Backyard Naturalist on rodenticides that you can find on the UEC YouTube channel. But please think of this: anytime you're considering putting out poison in your backyard, you're likely going to be poisoning more than what you're just targeting. So do the research first. And so that's the hunting part of it. And everything about the owls adds to their mystique. But we know what an owl sounds like. The typical owl, they hoot. A lot of owls do hoot. The owl hoot is like really good structure sound to travel far and wide at night, when visual cues are going to be harder. Their sounds travel well. So sounds have wavelengths. If the wavelength is shorter, it results in a higher pitch. Short wavelengths, those really high pitched, they don't travel far, and they tend to bounce off structures and kind of lose their integrity. So, the short of it is that a wavelength, just like, waves in the ocean, if you measure peak to peak, that's the wavelength. A sound wave will bounce off any structure that is shorter than that is bigger than that wavelength, excuse me. So if the wavelength is smaller, the structure is bigger, that wavelength, the sound will bounce off of it, will reflect off of it, and it loses integrity, loses in the leaves and stuff such. If the wavelength of the sound is bigger than the object, it essentially moves through it. So if it's a tree, um, anything big, the bigger wavelengths will move through the object and maintain their integrity, maintain the information that they have. So it's why like elephants and lions living, need to really project their sound in, miles or more, really low wavelengths. Um, and, little tiny birds with a high switch peak, they're not going to go very far and they're also going to lose their integrity. But essentially, that's okay because those little birds don't necessarily want too many things out there to know where it is. It wants to communicate to its family or potential mate or a potential competitor. And so those little short wavelengths traveling is good because they don't want the owls to find them. And then the ones with the bigger, lower wavelengths tend to be the bigger animals that don't have to worry so much about being eaten. So an owl, the bigger owls tend to have longer wavelengths, travel farther, remain true, passing through objects. Um, and the smaller owls tend to have higher pitched frequencies. And one of the dark side of owls is that owls will eat other owls, and so a great horned owl would, you know, feed on a screech owl, and so the screech owl doesn't want to necessarily let the great horned owls know where they are. Um, so that's based on the hoot of the owl. That's kind of the structure. A lot of owls do have that characteristic hoot. Probably one of the most common misidentifications of owls comes from one of my all-time favorite birds, the mourning dove. Also has that kind of low, mournful, hooty call, mistaken for owls. But not all owls hoot, and not all hooting owls will only hoot. So this is a well camouflaged screech owl, and the song is more of a whinny, more of a high whinny. Um, but it also has a call, particularly young birds, and this is true in a lot of small birds, small owls. It has a call that one could describe as blood-curdling, impish, evil, painful, sounds like someone in distress. And my family was reminded of that on a nighttime hike up in northern Wisconsin. For those of you that know my father, Vic Vargo, you probably understand that he pretty much lives to play jokes on people. And so he also attracts friends that like to play jokes. And so he and one of his friends, families were camping together, and the dads decided to take the kids on a night hike. And that's was prime time to scare us, scare the living daylights out of us. I'm still kind of working through some of those experiences. But there was a particular night, and I think probably by this time the dads had pretended like the flashlights went out mysteriously or something. It was pretty dark. We were all a little bit on edge, and we heard a horrific scream. So, in addition to being scared, we just assumed that it was either my dad or his friend trying to scare us. But they were both right there, and they were looking at each other, and they thought, initially thought it was the other one too. But we realized that nobody in our party had made that sound, and that's when we kind of pretty much all of us ran back to the campsite, full on screams. Flashlights mysteriously came on. We were all just scared out of our minds. Likely it was either a screech owl or a saw-whet owl, one of those smaller owls that can really just create a noise. Um, and you know, the screech, they have these very pleasant calls too, but then they have these raucous, cacophonic, loud, uh, cacophonic, just terrifying calls to go with it. And you can see this, if you go to the websites and hear some of the owls. The saw-whet owl in particular has just this really crazy noise. Some of those smaller owls and the barn owls too have these mechanical noises like hissing and other things to kind of complement the hooting sounds. So one of the reasons that they vocalize is courtship. and you'll often hear them in the dead of winter when everybody does owl prowls. Birds are pairing up, and they're one of the earliest birds to nest because they want their young to be born in spring when there's plenty of food around, as other critters are kind of waking up from their winter slumber activities or emerging or migrating in. And a lot of owls will combine their vocal courtship cues with visual courtship cues. So they'll do these dances at dusk or dawn when they can be seen, called a sky dance, kind of soar, dive, flap, and make noise, kind of like a timber doodle. And if they're successful, um, both mom and dad will attempt to raise a brood of young. So both parents help until the young are completely gone from the territory. They stay together. Usually it's the female that's brooding the eggs or the young, and so the males will go off and hunt and bring food to mom, and then later bring food to the young. Um, and another kind of interesting thing about owls is that the females, we believe, have a decent assessment of the quality of the habitat on that at that time, right? So you can have a year where the the territory has plenty of food, and when that happens, she will lay a larger clutch of eggs. If it's a poor year, and the resources are limited, she'll lay a much smaller clutch. If it's a really poor year, unfortunately, she will only focus on the firstborn, which will be big or have an advantage, and then usually the second one will not be um, either fed or just not make it. And there's sometimes she'll just actually feed the young one to the older one, which sounds, pretty harsh, but you're also looking at probably a situation where that youngest one probably wouldn't survive anyway. So really, really giving up their lives for their sibling. Um, so depending on the species, depending on the size of the owls, you could have a one in a clutch or even up to a dozen in some of the smaller species. There was a Cornell website, a Cornell camera on a barn owl box, which I'll never forget because mom was raising young. I think there was three young, and everything was going great. But then I think it was a bull snake got into the box, killed one of the young, and attempted to eat it, but the snake couldn't eat it. The young was already too big at that time. It tried. Meanwhile, the other two are just watching their sibling trying to be eaten by a snake. The snake gives up and leaves. And then you see the next kind of photo as the mom comes to the box, and you can almost just see her thinking, looking around. Two of her babies are alive. One is dead on the ground. Um, and then, she does what a good mom will do, and she basically tears up the dead one and feeds it to the live one. So, yeah, harsh, but in some ways very good parenting too, given the circumstances. I don't know. Uh, when the owl is ready to hatch, they've got that cool egg tooth. They break the eggs from the inside. And then you realize for such an awesome predator that they are born just totally helpless. No feathers or very few feathers, pin feathers, blind like a baby songbird. Um, I'll go out on a limb and say they're maybe objectively pretty ugly at this point. But then they turn into one of the most magnificent creatures on Earth, which is the baby owl. Early on, their heads are often so big and heavy, relative to the rest of the body, that they can't actually stay standing up too long, and they can't sleep standing up. So they do this belly down sleeping um, on the ground like a puppy. The one on the upper left reminds me of the day that I dropped my son off at his first K3 kindergarten day, and he literally plopped face down in the middle of the carpet of the floor and like, life is over. I'm here. I'm at school. I give up. But this is like the first of the adorable stages that you'll see with owls when they're not ready to fly, when they're bigger but not ready to fly, and the nest becomes too small. Then they go just hang out on a branch nearby, and they become that like second stage of adorableness. And one of my favorite stages to see owl babies, where they're just hanging out near the nest, not ready to fly, just chilling, super adorable. This is for owls that nest in trees. For the ones that nest on the ground, it might even get better because they enter what's like the running stage. They can't fly, they're too big for the nest. Um, they just run around like little ninjas, like little adorable feathered mini people. Um, so again, just one of the many reasons why it seems impossible not to be captivated by these birds. And people have been captivated for, again, likely as long as we've been around. If you the that famous Chauvet cave art in France, which is 35,000 years old, had owl imagery in it. Owls are in stories and art throughout the world, throughout history. The Romans believed the owl foreshadowed the death of Julius Caesar. The Hindus associated the owl with the goddess Lakshmi, and it represented luck. The Apache tell stories that if an owl visits you in your dreams, that meant you were about to die. And throughout history, owls have been excellent to farmers, in particular as pest control. The barn owl, in particular, a single barn owl can dispose of 50 pounds of gophers in a year, and gophers are pretty light. Uh, a family of barn owls can eat 3,000 rodents in a 4-month breeding cycle. That's great for the farmers, even better for the environment because then the farmer isn't using that rodenticide. That's better for their bottom line, better for the environment. So it there are these things called owl cafes in parts of the world where you can go and get coffee and hang out with owls, kind of like our cat cafes. Unfortunately, this is thought to be not so great for the owls, since you're pretty much interacting with them and disturbing them during the daytime when they'd normally be sleeping. So, in one way, a testament to our fascination with owls, but another way, a testament to our not thinking things through maybe completely before acting upon them. There's really no danger to humans, although there are stories. Usually it's a runner that's being attacked by an owl, uh, probably during the nesting period, um, and, defending its territory. Sometimes there's stories where they think an owl might be hunting the ponytail that's bobbing up and down of a jogger or you know, maybe thinking it's prey. But, red-winged blackbirds do this too. Maybe red-winged blackbirds are even scarier, but I guess the talons of owls are a little more you don't want to mess with them. So I probably don't know anybody that's been attacked by an owl. You might, or you might have heard stories. But other than being solitary, which they usually are, they're not solitary, obviously, during the breeding season. They will, in certain seasons, go into these communal roosts, like a lot of other birds. And being in a communal roost is good for warmth and cold climates. Often information is shared with each other about hunting grounds. It's safer. But for the most part, they kind of live up to that solitary label that we put on them. And then for whatever reason, we, particularly in the Western culture, associate the owls with being wise. There's a couple of theories to this. Both probably contribute in their own way. For one is just, it's hard to describe. The face of an owl kind of looks like it's a bird that's thinking. I don't know if it's just the big forward-facing eyes, the slow, almost like thoughtful and intentional way it moves its head, like it knows exactly what's going on. Um, so kind of just looks like a thinker. But the other contributor is that in Greek mythology, Zeus's daughter Athena, who is the goddess of wisdom, had an owl as a companion. So probably both of these things are the contributors that led to the owl being the only creature on Earth who knows how many licks it takes to get to the Tootsie Roll center of a Tootsie Pop. Spoiler alert, the answer is 3. The smallest owl in the world is the elf owl of the southwestern US. An adult elf owl weighs about the same as a golf ball. And another really amazing fact is that I found out that, and because Tori is here, uh, some owls use their own poop as bait for prey. So the burying owls in particular in parts of the world love to eat dung beetles as their favorite prey. And so if you're gonna attract dung beetles, you got to get them out with your own dung. So they're kind of like fishing, just not with a worm, with their own poop. The dung beetles come to the poop. The owls get to to eat their favorite meal. So, um, that wraps up some of the stories that I found fascinating about the owl. I hope you enjoyed them. I hope you learned something new or had your curiosity piqued. Thanks for joining us for the kickoff to the Brew City Birding Festival here on Backyard Naturalist. Tomorrow is the 12th annual Green Birding Challenge. Sunday, we can all contribute our data to the Backyard Birding Blitz. And then every day next week, there's going to be more adventures until we wrap up the festival right here again with a look at another fascinating group of birds next Friday, the parrots. So thanks for joining. I will now stop sharing my screen.